Hi, Helena. Thank you so
Hi.
much. That was so wonderful talking with Laura and hearing all the
I
amazing things
know.
she's doing all the way here in Spain, of all
Plus,
places.
catching us up with all the past students was wonderful. And
Exactly.
she's getting married, yay!
Yay!
Okay, so how did you cope? How did you help your students cope?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's crazy, Helena. We came back to school. I can't remember exactly what year it is. I should know right off. And we just had a new computer, and all the kids said they wanted to study weather disasters. So I went, oh, well, let's do hurricanes because it's hurricane season. And we watched, it was when weather.com first came out. We watched the hurricane come right onto Louisiana, right
Wow.
across New Orleans, Helena,
Wow.
and not one peep on the news that night. So I called Red Cross, and a good friend of ours was working there. She heads up Red Cross, and I had no idea. So the next day, I went to training with Red Cross. I opened the first preschool autistic class in Mississippi, down in the deep South. I got my degree, my master's at Tulane. So I had this really strong connection with Louisiana, with the deep South, and so when that hurricane hit, I called my friend who turned out to be head of Red Cross, and within less than 7 days, I was in a shelter in Louisiana, and I they sent us to the largest shelter, which was at the LSU basketball stadium or coliseum, and I opened a school for 450 kids, and
Out of a
um,
tent.
well, it wasn't a tent. It was in a shelter.
A shelter.
Everybody had cots, and it was interesting. The cots were all organized by the survivors. That's what we called them, in their neighborhoods, their New
Oh,
Orleans neighborhoods.
how
It was so
wonderful.
interesting. I had so many experiences. I could make a whole podcast about that, Helena. But many of the kids found their parents while they were working with me. I had set it up just like I had all my other classes. I had a little gal that looked like she was on her way to becoming a street walker, and she said, "Didn't anyone tell you I don't read?" And I showed her that she could read like in less than 10 minutes. And I made her my TA. And there were some amazing people from the community that came in to help us with the school. I called teachers, administrators.
Wow.
It was really great. It was a wonderful experience. But yeah, opened the first school for preschool kids with autism. A lot of stuff, yeah, a lot, which I could make we could do another um, podcast about.
The stuff, the ways that you help those students cope with grief and disaster, did you find that helped you in your special ed classroom that
Absolutely.
was K through 8?
Exactly. A lot of the same things, like giving students a chance to pick what they want to study, talk about their ideas from a piece of literature, an art piece. When they do the art and then write about the art, wide range of things. We had journals that the students would write, and if they wanted to, they could share them. Um,
Which is all things you do in special ed.
it's all the same thing, yeah. But it was, we were all aware of the therapeutic component,
Mm-hmm.
and that nothing was graded. And like I said, the community brought in gifts and all kinds of things for the students. So it was more like a time for them to keep in touch with their academics, but be loved and feel treasured and be embraced.
Well, SEL or social emotional learning is like the big buzzword
Oh,
now.
is it? I didn't know that.
Yes,
Yeah.
in education. It sounds like you were doing that way before it became a buzzword. It sounds like you recognize it. These kids can't really learn if their social emotional
Yeah.
is not strong. And I would imagine in Katrina they were worried about their
Oh, it was
families, where's their
outrageous.
home.
Yeah.
So to get them to do anything is impressive in my
Well, and they
opinion.
can't talk about it or think about it without the language.
Right.
All that abstract thinking, metacognition.
Mhm.
If you're not helping them develop language through conversation, drawing, things like that, it's going to be really hard for them to process what happened to them.
Oh,
Games
God, yes.
even help. But well, thank you. I think.
Wait, I have one more
for
thing
sure.
I
Thank
really
you, Helena.
need-
Of course.
I really need to ask you is first of all, I want to thank you for your work as the grievance person
Oh,
for our
yes.
union. And can you give me any examples of times where you've stepped in as the grievance person and made, because it's usually a grievance against an administrator who says, I don't like what you did, and they're trying to make you do something, that you don't want to do or that you shouldn't do. So
Yes.
can you give me an example?
I sure can, Helena. Well, I mostly did it for myself because in special education, there's very clear laws to protect the students and make sure that you don't have too many students in one classroom.
Mhm.
You don't have students whose needs cannot be met on a public campus, to make sure that all the paperwork is turned in the right way, especially the assessment, the diagnosis. Like when a new student is referred to special education, they have to have a specific standardized and normed assessments. You can't just look at them and say, oh, I think this or that.
And you're responsible for all of that.
For all of that. And I had directors who supposedly had special education training who would do those things. They go, oh, well, this one was working good in that class and this, and I would go, well, where's the assessment? And in fact, sometimes when I was collaborating with the other mainstream teachers, we'd have two separate assessments on two separate kids, but we'd been told by our special education administrator that it was the same kid. So it was really crazy. And there was sometimes the support people, like I had an occupational therapist that said a student who definitely needed occupational therapy didn't need it anymore because the student was in 6th grade. And you know what, Helena, once a student hits 6th grade, you can't teach them anything. So why waste your time? And so, right, my response was like, oh, I get it. So when they're in high school and they don't know algebra, you just go, whatever, they don't need to learn math. So, just things like that made me hyper. I was threatened by one of the administrators once. But anyway, it could be another podcast. But the main idea is that those laws are there for a reason. And if you're in special education as an instructor, you better know those laws because they're there to help you serve your students to the optimum ability level. But because I was hyper sensitive to the regular teachers around me and many of my peers. We talked about this a lot, and so I became the grievance person. And it was really interesting, almost every single grievance that happened with the regular ed, it was because the administrator didn't understand the teacher's program. The contract. That's the other one, Helena. Like there'd be a place where all the students are supposed to put their homework. There's a grade book that the students could look at every other week or whatever, There would be parent-teacher conferences. And every parent with a complaint never attended a parent-teacher conference, had no idea where their students' homework belonged, had no idea about the online grades. They just hadn't taken it upon themselves. They just preferred to blame the teacher. And then the administrator didn't stand up for the teacher. They just, oh, well, okay, let me go get that teacher. So it was a very interesting experience that, special education, we have a lot of laws, but so does regular education.
Well, and I really appreciate you doing that. I know it wasn't an easy burden. I myself needed a grievance person at some point.
We all have, yeah.
Yeah, we probably all have.
It's part of being a teacher.
And
yeah.
I would say that 90% of the time, it's because the administrator is A, not supporting the teacher, B, not understanding the teacher's program, and C, not understanding the contract.
Or the law, educational laws. Both, all four of those, exactly.
And it's funny, when I got my admin credential, law is one of the subjects we looked at. And that brings me back to my complaint about the administrative credential program, because they don't practice that.
That's right. They do not.
And it's awful.
It's really awful. Well, thank you, Helena. This has
Thank
been
you,
so wonderful.
yeah.
Cheers. Until
Cheers.
next time.
Yes.
Who knows where we'll be, but we will have a really exciting topic.
Yes, we will. Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you so much.